Alrighty, let's get to some headlines from across the state of Texas. We will start in the coaching ranks, and we will start with a pretty major coaching hire within Central Texas, and that is that Mart has been looking for a head coach for a couple of weeks now. If you remember, Kevin Hoffman announced his retirement at the end of last season after a spectacular career leading the Panthers. After a thorough search, the Mart ISD has recommended that it will be Chris Lancaster to be the next head coach there of the Mart Panthers. Chris Lancaster is the head coach at Robinson right now. This is a guy. I'll just say it. I think this is a home run hire for Mart. It's a guy who understands Central Texas. He's had success everywhere he's been because before, if you remember, before he was at Robinson, where he went 13-8 over 2 seasons, he was the head coach at Little River Academy and did fantastic work with the Swole Bees, with the Bumblebees. He was spectacular there. Everywhere he's been, Chris Lancaster has been a winner. And I think that is going to translate there to Mart. Obviously, this is interesting because this is an external hire. Mart has not had an external hire, quote unquote, in quite some time. But if you're going to do it, you need a guy who understands the Mart ecosystem and the Mart community. And Chris Lancaster at Robinson is a guy who spent a lot of time in Central Texas and done spectacular work there. I think this is a home run hire for Mart. I think this is absolutely spectacular and a big win there for Mart. Chris Lancaster is going to be the next head coach of the Mart Panthers. Elsewhere, let's go to New Caney. And this was one that was floating around in the ether for a while. This was one of those jobs or one of those rumors that kind of wouldn't go away. New Caney has been looking for a new head coach for quite some time. And they have landed on Galveston Ball head coach Sheldon Benight to be their next head coach, making the move from Galveston there to New Caney. This makes a lot of sense to me. Sheldon Benight has been a guy who's done spectacular work, I think, at Galveston Ball. I think a lot of people are going to look at it and say, oh, well, yeah, of course he did. He did it with Jonah Williams. They were a lot more than just Jonah Williams. That was a quality program that he went there. And so Sheldon Benight is going to be the new head coach there at New Caney. This is a guy who we started hearing rumblings about this hire when the job kind of opened up, and over the past couple of weeks, it's gotten louder and louder. He went 34-20 there at Ball, led them to the area playoffs. Mike DeWitt left New Caney to go take over at Saginaw, leaving open New Caney, and so now it's going to be Sheldon Benight there, which does open up a job. He does have a lot of history there in the Houston area. He was there at Galena Park North Shore. He was at Dickinson. He was actually a part of the state runner-up team at Marshall in 2004. He takes over a New Caney program that I think is in a tough district, but I think he is the right guy for the job. And Sheldon Benight is going to be the next head coach there at New Caney, which leaves open, by the way, a really interesting job at Galveston Ball. So we will be tracking that now after this. Now, let's go to Brownwood. Let's talk about Brownwood. This has been something we've been talking about a lot with kind of the, let's say, rigmarole in Brownwood. With Sammy Burnett being non-renewed, he then tenders his resignation and leaves. Or rather, he didn't have his contract extended. He then tenders his resignation and leaves. Brownwood goes into the search. They end up hiring. This is a really interesting match here. Gerald Brixey. Gerald Brixey is going to be the next head coach at Brownwood. Gerald Brixey is the Katy offensive coordinator. He is a guy who has been on the staff there at Katy under Gary Joseph since 2012. Been a part of 3 state championship teams, 2012, 2015, and 2020. And he was also the offensive line coach there for a little bit. Before that, he was an assistant coach at Galena Park North Shore. He was the head coach. Joseph had coaching experience. He was head coach at Comanche for 5 years back in the earlier part of the late part of the last decade. this is a really interesting mix of two really proud programs and two high-profile programs, Katy to Brownwood. So one of the things that I think is interesting is the spotlight is not going to be too big, I think, for Gerald Brixey. Here's a guy who's used to being in the Katy spotlight, and there are a few spotlights in Texas brighter than the Katy spotlight. So I'm very interested to see how he goes there. Now, Matt Stepp mentions in his piece, and I agree with him, a big part of his job is just kind of bringing this community back together. Because I think that the way that the Sammy Burnett era ended in Brownwood, I think has done some fracturing within the community. It's going to be up to Gerald Brixey to kind of bring this community together. Now, look, nothing brings a community together like winning. So if you go out there and win, you're going to go out there and probably be pretty darn good, and the community will take care of itself. What is also going to be interesting is how much of that Katy offense ports over to Brownwood. Of course, Katy, when you think about them, you think about single back or two back, kind of pro style offense, a lot of running game, and then a lot of play action off of that running game. Will they kind of port that over? Fascinating to see, but Gerald Brixey is going to be the next head coach there at Brownwood, there as one of the highest profile jobs in Texas, lands their guy in Gerald Brixey, the offensive coordinator from Katy. Elsewhere, let's go back down to the Houston area and talk about Klein. The Klein Bearcats are now looking for a head coach, and that is because they've lost their head coach to the college ranks. And that is that longtime Klein high school head coach, Shane Hallmark, or rather the former Klein high school head coach, Shane Hallmark, is going to be he's been at the head coach there at Klein for the last 15 years, done good work there. He is now going to be the defensive coordinator at Schreiner. The Schreiner is a school that is launching their football program, and he's going to be their next defensive coordinator. Fascinating to see Keith Allen's going to be their next head coach, starting a Division III program kind of from scratch. His defensive coordinator is going to have big high school ties in Keith Allen, or rather the Shane Hallmark. Their defense going to become their defensive coordinator, leaving Klein to become their defensive coordinator there at Schreiner. That leaves open a big job there in the Houston area. Excited to see where they go with that. This is a guy who also led Fort Bend Hightower to the 2009 5A Division I or 5A state championship game. So a guy with big time pedigree, going to become the next defensive coordinator there at Schreiner. Finally, in the coaching ranks, let's talk about Center, the Rough Riders. Routinely one of the highest scoring offenses in Texas high school football every single year, and they are going to stick with the offensive scheme, as Center has announced that Nick Brown is going to be their next head coach. Nick Brown is the Aubrey offensive coordinator, where he's done big work there, replacing Ricky Joe Meeks, who departed in February to go take over at Henderson. So now the head coach there at Center is going to be Aubrey offensive coordinator Nick Brown. He's an Aubrey native, but he spent the last 9 seasons there at his alma mater, and he's been their offensive coordinator for the past couple of years. And their offensive coordinator their offense has been humming there at Aubrey. I would expect the same to be happening there at Center. Keep an eye on that, as Aubrey offensive coordinator Nick Brown is going to be the next head coach there at Center. Finally, I want to draw your attention to something on TexasFootball.com. It's a new story that our friend Carter Yates just wrote, and it is about a competing podcast. That's right. It's a high school football podcast. We don't like to promote other podcasts, but it's run by a gentleman named Kaleb Maryland. Greg Powers, you familiar with Kaleb Maryland?
DCTF 3-star Kaleb Maryland?
DCTF 3-star Kaleb Maryland. The quarterback there at Galena Park North Shore has his own podcast called Player's Choice.
Love it.
In which he interviews other stars, mostly from the Houston area, and just talks ball with these guys. I listened to one of them. I think it's pretty good. I am a little frustrated with how good it is. I wish he'd stop. That's not true. The more the merrier.
You know what would be really funny?
What's that?
Is if, he just had, other media people on there. Mm-hmm. So, we interview players on our show, and then he interviews other media people. It'd be funny.
That would be very funny. Yeah, it'd be he's just going to interview,
Yeah.
Carter Yates.
Yeah.
I talked to Caleb about his podcast back at the Next Level camp in January, and I was like trying to talk my way onto it and then realize it's for players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had the straight Jesuit running back, John Hebert, on stuff like that, which he's 3,000 yard back.
Yeah.
Which that was a fun listen. So go listen to it. Kaleb Maryland's podcast called Player's Choice down there. And we're not in the business of promoting other podcasts, but
Well, he's found a couple of really good sleepers that he's interviewed already. Hebert being one and Zaquan none.
is he coming for our jobs?
Literally.
Hey, ball knows ball.
Yeah.
Ball
that's
knows ball.
Right. Anyway, there's some headlines from across the state of Texas.